Hello and welcome to my YouTube video. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how to graft or Kitchener knit one purl one ribbing in a fabric that's worked from the bottom up, or it could be top down, but the fabric is going in one direction. You're not matching up two bind offs or two cast ons. This would be the same as matching a bind off to a cast on if you were seaming. So I call it a unidirectional fabric, and I'm going to show you how to graft in knit one, purl one. We can see it both sides. So here we go. First, we're going to talk a little bit about stitch anatomy. So this is a little chart of knit one, purl one ribbing. You can see the columns of knits with the columns of purls in between. And this fabric's already been separated. A row has been taken out. Or it could be that this was cast on here and these are live loops, and then this is the live loops remaining when you take off a provisional cast on. For example, if you were knitting a cowl lengthwise and you wanted to connect the live stitches at the last row to live stitches for the first row and have a continuous fabric around, you would use a technique like this. So we can see there's a knit stitch, and then it goes into a purl stitch, knit stitch, purl stitch. So we can see the purl bumps here. On the opposite side, we don't see a column of stitches here. What we see, the stitches are here, and these are the loops on either side of the stitch. So these would be the same as the smiles on the back of the fabric if you were working in stockinette stitch, or the strands between the stitches. Here's the actual stitch. This is the strand between this stitch and this stitch. So these are not stitches, they're loops. When you put them on the needles, they're going to look like this, and then you're going to drop this fabric down behind, and so that it will look like this. The stitch mount will be the standard stitch mount, which I'm going to show you how to do now. I'm going to remove the yarn from the swatch and show you how to mount the stitches before the grafting, which is probably the trickiest part of this type of graft. I'm going to clip the center stitch of the knit one, purl one ribbing, and I'm just going to remove the yarn. And I'm going to remove it all the way this way, and I'll remove it all the way this way, and I'll be back. Here are the two halves. Now we started out with our swatch with the cast on here. The tail for the cast on was to the left, the bind off was at the top, and the tail to the bind off is the top right. We want to make sure we're in that same orientation of the swatch when we put it together to maintain the knit one, purl one ribbing across the graft. So we're going to put these stitches. These are easy to see. These are just knits standing up from the fabric, knits on one, knit, purl, and we're going to put these on the needle in the standard stitch mount. And you've done this many times before when you've picked up drop stitches. It's exactly the same. Picking up the stitches on the top half, I like to pick them up holding the fabric this way. It just makes it easier. So I'm just going to turn it. Here's our bind off and the tail on the right side. I'm going to turn it this way. And I'm going to start here. Now what's tricky about this is sometimes these stitches will actually look like they're twisted, and you may pick them up incorrectly. So let's look at them very closely. You have to pull the fabric apart a little bit. So what we want to do is we want to put the needle from back to front, or from right to left, and we want that tail, the tail to the right, and the yarn is not going to go around the needle. It's open at the bottom. The legs are not crossing. The left edge of the yarn is coming down here and going over to the next stitch. Then this stitch, we have to open it up this way. If you pick it up this way, it's going to be twisted. The front yarn is going to be going to the left. You want to pick it up so that the left leg is going to the left. The left leg, and check each time so you get the correct stitch mount It's just the nature of changing from a knit to a purl across the fabric, and these are the loops between the stitches. They're not the stitches, and that's why they look very different. Just always want to make sure that the back leg is, that yarn is going to the left. So you have to turn that stitch all the way around. And this is where I see most people make mistakes in grafting the knit 1 purl 1 ribbing, or knit 2 purl 2 ribbing, or a seed stitch, or anything with a stitch pattern where you're changing from knits to purls. So now we have this on the needles, and we're going to check it. We're going to lay it down. Once you look at this, you want to notice that the loop is just to the right of the column of stitches that it's coming down from. There's the purls just to the right, knits just to the right, purls to the right, and check that all the way across. And that way you'll know that the loops are not twisted. So we're going to take this piece and hold it behind this piece. So now we are looking, if the orientation, we're looking at the right side of this fabric, but the wrong side of this fabric. We're going, and you notice these loops do not represent a stitch. They're the loops between the stitches. Each one of these loops represents a stitch. You can see it's coming straight up from a stitch. So just keep that in mind. I've threaded my tapestry needle. So the first column of stitches on our swatch are knits. So we're going to do the first half of the mantra, the second half of the mantra. So on the front needle, if we were doing a knit, it would be knit off, purl on, right? So we're just going to do the second half of that as a setup, so it would be purl on. And the back stitch, if we look at it, we can see it looks below this, looks like a purl bump, so it's a purl, a loop coming from a purl. And for a purl, you would purl off, knit on. So we're just going to do the second half for the setup, which means knit on. Now I'm just going to take all of these yarn tails and put them between the two fabrics so they're not in my way. Now we're going to start. So we look at the front needle, and we can see that this is a knit column. When you're transitioning from a knit to a purl, you're going to treat this as if it's the first half of the knit mantra, and this one as the second half of the purl mantra. So the knit mantra would be knit off, purl on, but the purl mantra would be purl off, knit on. So we need to knit off, knit on, because we're changing from a knit to a purl right here. So knit off, knit on. The back needle, we're going to start by knit. It's going to create a stitch between these two legs. It's going to create a stitch. We're going to knit off, purl on. We come to the front needle, and we're at the top of a purl. So we're going to do the first half of the purl mantra, which is purl off, but then we have a knit column, so we have to do the second half of the knit mantra. So it would be purl off, purl on. The back needle would be purl off, knit on. I highly recommend practicing this on a swatch or two, and you'll get it. We have a knit column, so we treat it as a knit, and then the second, which is knit on, so knit off, knit on. We move to the back, and it's going to be knit off, purl on. Front, we can identify it's a purl column, so it's going to be purl off, purl on. The back's going to be purl off, knit on. And you continue until you come to the end, and we'll be there in just a second. Okay, we've come to where we just have 2 stitches remaining. I just finished on the front needle. I'm ready to do the back needle. I'm going to knit off, purl on, purl off, purl on. The back needle I'm going to purl off. The front needle I'm going to purl, knit on, knit off. Okay, let's take a look at this. So we've got some stitches that seem to be uneven. The first thing I do is I just kind of stretch it out, tug on it a little bit. A lot of times that will even out the stitches, and it did very nicely. So our tension looks good, and that does just take some practice. Now let's finish off the ends here. You know, this is worked flat, so that means that if you watch the Stockinette stitch swatch that I had prior to this, which will be linked over here when this video is over, up in this corner you'll see a link to it. When you're working flat and you take a row of knitting out, you're going to have 1 fewer stitch on the top than you do on the bottom. But you have a half stitch on each end, which we can see here. So let's finish that off. Now that we have the graft in, we can fix that. Just put that end on the tapestry needle without shredding it. And you come down to, this is the first grafted stitch, and you're going to go from front to back. And that finishes off that edge. And we'll go to the other edge and thread this strand onto our tapestry needle. And go down through the last grafted stitch. So now it's finished. Now, what if your stitches are uneven and you want to even them out? This is how you do it on knit 1, purl 1 ribbing. You can pull up a strand. You can see the knit stitches here. The purls are down in between, and there is the top of the purl stitch. It looks like a frown. So you could pull up a leg here, pull up on the frown. That pulls yarn from this stitch. Move this yarn from the frown down into this stitch, find the next frown, pull up on it, and so on and so forth, and you can move any extra yarn and readjust the size of the stitches across the graft. So it looks the same on both sides. It's a contiguous knit 1, purl 1 ribbing. If you like my videos, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button. There will be coming up a video on grafting knit 2, purl 2 ribbing that goes in one direction. See down below, there'll be links, timestamps for this video. The drawing is attributed to Francoise Monroe and her husband Andre do the drawings for me. And further description of the video will be down below. Happy knitting. See you next time.